join us will join us in a couple of minutes. As you've seen, we started the recording process, so the companies who couldn't attend the webinar today will be provided with the registration, with the recording link, as well as all the presentations and materials that I received this morning from our expert, Lieke Grieg. So together with the materials from the previous webinar, you are kindly invited to share it with all your networks and the companies that might be interested in tendering in Japan. Today, today we are starting the second webinar organized in the framework of the Extra Light project. Focused on the government procurement in Japan in collaboration with the EU-Japan Center for Industrial Cooperation. Today's topic that then I will leave the floor to Lieke to explain better and go in detail. Let's say we'll focus on the procedures, eligibility procedures, assessment standards, and all legal issues that we should know, that the company should know if they would like to approach the government procurement in Japan. The webinar will last 1 hour. You have the chat. If you want to write your questions, you can raise your hands. We will have a couple of minutes at the end in the question and answer sessions. But if you think that there is some topic that maybe is not very clear, or the part that Lieke will start to explain needs some additional justification, additional information, feel free to interrupt us, raise your hands, and we will go deep in the specific argument. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for the cluster managers for attending and the companies who join us today. And I leave the floor to Lieke.
Okay, well, good morning again. Let me see if I can first share the screen with you for the presentation of today. That's it, I think. Yes. Here we go. So can you all see it?
Yes.
Yes, good. Okay, so after last week's talk about a more general aspect, and in particular provision of information, well, that took quite a bit of time, so there wasn't that much time for your questions. I don't know if you had the opportunity to look a bit into into the information that I provided you with, and if there were any questions or further clarifications that you wanted to have from on the basis of my talk that we had last week. So let me start with that for today.
Let's say from my side, I went through the portals that you highlighted. I tried to use the Google Translator to understand most of the steps, how to proceed. So I think that from my side was like to the first acknowledge of what we have and how we can use it. And and I tried also to download some documents and also use the Google Translator, but I didn't get in so deep into the text to ask you some specific questions, because I think it was important, from at least from my side, to understand where I can look for information and how if the portals works, how the Google Translator works, if it's more or less understandable what they are looking for.
Okay. So and no companies have approached you in that they wanted to participate in the tender that I provided information about? It's a bit short notice, I know.
At this short notice, no.
But yeah, well, you never know that it was a perfect match. That there would be a company in your clusters that is specialized in providing lighting for art stages. So you could never know, and that's the way it works often in business as well. So okay,
I think that maybe somebody will even start thinking of this, but then they saw the deadline, and you know, it's like
that's also something we will that I mentioned it last week already, and it will also come back again today in my talk of today. Participating in tenders is of course a lot of hectic short work in with short lead times and a bit of pressure cooker working. So that's part of doing business with the government in competitive tenders or in tenders. Okay, well, let's then continue to my talk of today. I'm going a bit too fast. So today I want to have a closer look at the following things. First, we're going to look at, well, what is more or less a standard tender procedure, and that will also, while explaining that, it will probably also give you an idea of the kind of challenges that your company, the company that you represent, will also need to face. But yeah, it's more or less what the most common procedure used for a contract of any substance. We're not talking about buying a box of pens, but the bit of the larger contract. Then I'll discuss shortly about the types of assessment that are most prevalent in Japan and evaluation of bids, etc. Then that will be followed by a discussion of eligibility requirements that are very common in Japan, and how to obtain it and how that works. And then at the end, I want to talk a bit about some legal issues that you need to adhere to when taking part or winning a contract, and also that you need to prepare before you can have a chance of winning a contract in Japan. So in terms of technical standards. Okay, so then let's move on. The standard tender procedure. Well, what we saw last week were tender notices, and well, of course, that is not that making a tender notice is usually the end of already a process that has already been taking place for quite a while. It's basically a culmination of the preparatory phase for a government organization. They require a service or a product, or they're bureaucratic organizations. So and of course the first thing is that they need to secure a budget. Governments usually work with annual budgets, very strict guidelines around how it's being spent. So that's also one of the difficulties in Japan, with that many contracts are often 1 year. Because well, they don't know how the budget will be for the next year, so they want everything spent within the year. And also what you also see is that at the beginning of each year, they will the fiscal year in Japan starts in April. So usually in the first 3 months of the year, there is a lot of tender activity, because there's new budget and the planning is being made. So they put out the notices. So it's busy season, tendering season. And in particular for larger projects, sorry, excuse me, that need more preparation and also a longer period of time in order to be completed. So in the first 3 months of the fiscal year, it's busy, and then also like in November, December is usually a busy period, because then there's also the period that the annual contracts that are repeated every year, and many of the things stay the same. The services that government organizations need to provide stay the same, so they need to renew it. So those annual contracts are usually up for on offer again, starting in November, December. So during that period as well, there is a lot of tender activity going on. But for an individual tender, first thing is the budget must be secured. Well, if it's a complex project that requires the input from various departments and sections within a government organization, of course there will be a project team that is going to prepare the specifications and the procedure. The people that, of course, we have most deal with are just the people who do the paperwork, the contracting officers. Usually do not have direct contact to the end users. Also keep that in mind with your if you are in contact with government organizations, that there are two different audiences that you deal with. You have the end users that have, well, they are interested in the technical aspects and how to use a good or a service, while the contracting department is usually interested in the paperwork and getting a good price, those kind of things. So keep that in mind. There are different audiences that you need to deal with. So in the prepared, there will be a project team that will work on the specifications. What do we need, and what does the product or the service that we want to buy needs to meet? What kind of goals do we want to achieve with this new good and service? That are all defined by the project team in that phase. Well, that phase also involves the gathering of market information. Like, well, we want something, government organization, we want something, and we have a problem, and we want to offer a new service to our citizens, or we want to renovate our gymnasiums at schools, those kind of things. We want to see what's available on the market. So they will do, there will be an internal gathering of market information. So if it's concrete goods, the contracting department or the technical specialist, they will have their catalogs, or they do their website search and see what's available on the market. Well, here we come again at that point that I made last week, is the language barrier. Most of the Japanese mid-level bureaucrats, their English ability is not very high, so they will usually stick to what's available in Japanese. So this is also a point for your companies, is that in some form you need to make sure that your product is already basically on the radar in this phase. Here comes basically the marketing of products comes to the fore. That you somehow get your products on the radar of Japanese government organizations. So that's why we also always say, like, well, make sure that you have Japanese language information available, and try to use the marketing channels at your disposal, like you going to a trade fair or other ways. Well, work with a partner that does it for you, that you are on the radar and that your products are being considered in this phase. So, and that's the internal gathering. Well, in some cases, and unfortunately they don't do it that much, I wish they did more, and in particular in the WTO framework and the EPA framework, is using prior information notices to where it's done in a public way, gathering market information. So input from the market, what's available. We want something, and this is what we have. This is what we have, and we have described the problem. And now we need your solutions from the market. So prior information notices is a public way of doing it. And unfortunately, Japanese government organizations do only use that very sparingly.
Sorry, Like, so something,
yeah.
Just one question. So something like pre-commercial procurement doesn't exist in Japan?
Sorry, can you repeat that? I didn't hear that.
Pre-commercial procurement.
Pre-commercial?
Yes, because in Europe we have this this typology, not in all countries still, unfortunately, but let's say that the European Commission is trying to push it very strong.
Yeah.
They call it pre-commercial procurement. It means to engage the companies in developing the, let's say, the tender, or in developing this customized solutions for the public authority. And they include them in this so-called pre-commercial procedure that will lead to the definition of all the characteristics and features of the tender. And then the companies who took part in this dialogue, let's say, can apply and bid to provide the solutions that will be customized. They should be customized for the specific city needs or the public authority needs.
In some form, that is also done in Japan, yes, but it's and probably at the local level, because they, as we will see later on as well, is most government organizations, they have their fixed roster of suppliers who have registered with them. So they have access to a pool of suppliers, and they can use certain selective tenders, for example, what they do outside of the WTO framework, to develop it in such a way. That's being done. Also, also be aware that many of the tenders that are being put up for auction usually have other tenders before it. If we talk about a complex construction tender, that is usually already preceded by a tender involving the design of a certain project, and there is usually a number of contracts, in particular in large projects, that are being put out in order to get the project completed. Yeah. So it's in a form, as you say, in a different form. It's available. Yes. So if I may continue, then once sufficient information has been secured in one way or the other, or through discussions with the market as well, then it will result in drafting of specifications. If the government organization is still unsure about whether the specifications will reflect are such that will generate sufficient interest from the market, it can still put out a notice where a request for comments is being published, where the market gets the chance to look at the specifications and give comments and tell the ordering entity whether it's feasible or not. So that's also where a discussion between the market and the orderer is taking place. Yeah. So that's the preparatory phase. Then well, that will then result in a tender notice or an invitation to tender. It's a different way of saying it. Well, if it's as we explained last week, if it involves a project that is involves a large amount of money, it will have to be done under WTO rules and also subsequently under EPA rules, and it will then result in the publication of a notice in the formal government gazette for central government, or the equivalents that are also exist at the sub-central and at the local level. So, and there that will be then the first public, basically the public notice of that a contract is coming up. As I also showed already last week, is that for larger projects, the government organizations will announce an annual plan of what they are planning to offer in terms of contracts for the fiscal year. That will give you a longer time to prepare. But basically, with the tender notice published, then the clock starts ticking. So the larger projects for the central and sub-central government will be available on JETRO, as we saw last week, and in the Gazette. If it's a domestic tender, it can be on the Chotatsu portal, which we also saw introduced last week, with no English information, or at their own portals and websites. Yeah, it will coincide with the publication of making available the specifications as well. Then, and as we saw last week, then yeah, for the suppliers, the issue becomes getting the specifications to see whether yeah, it's a business case. Then that will the clock has started ticking, and then it will depend on the way that the project team and the organization have structured the tender procedure, is whether there should be an explanatory meeting. So that's where the entity will invite the prospective bidders to join a meeting. Nowadays, it's more often online, but before COVID, it was usually a physical meeting somewhere at an office, at the office of the entity that was issuing the notice. Well, usually it will be held within 2 or 3 weeks, but also sometimes we see that they only give you 3 or 4 days to make sure that you're in time to attend the meeting. And that also shows a bit about the local character of procurement in Japan. They don't really take foreign companies into account, especially not companies that do not have a representative in Japan. Well, sometimes if you want to be participating in a tender, you have to attend the explanatory meeting. And otherwise they will not give you the specifications. So that's sometimes a precondition in order to be allowed to join a competition. It's not very common in the case of construction, public works construction contracts. And that has a bit to do with the, most likely has to do with the fact that there have been a lot of incidents involving corruption, collusion, that it primarily involved construction related contract. And our impression is that for that reason, the physical or the contact between the ordering and the companies that are going to supply or going to build a public structure is being kept to a minimum. So for public works, you usually do not have explanatory meetings. Well, once that has been held, that's basically when the stress phase starts, because in many cases they want you to prepare an expression of interest, and that's not just in most cases. It's not only filling in a piece of paper with the name of your company and an address and contact information, saying that you want to join the competition or place a bid. It usually involves a lot of other documents as well. And usually you have only 3 to 4 weeks after the publication of the notice before they want to have an expression of interest on the table with all the documentation. So it's that piece of paper that you want to take part, but also the submission of supplier qualification documents, licenses, certificates, also, for example, technical documents, prove that you have actually delivered the similar type of good or service in the past. Sometimes also with the costs of the previous contracts, etc. They usually they can ask quite a lot of information that, of course, all need to be prepared in a short period of time into Japanese. If you have some information about foreign client or your clientele in a project that you've done in Italy, then you will have to make a Japanese equivalent of it that they can read it. So that's usually a period of high stress in order to have everything ready before the deadline. And deadlines in Japan are hammered in granite, so you cannot go over it. Then, once that, then the phase comes for the preparation and submission of bids. If there is not a previous deadline for the expression of interest, then the documents that I have just described, you have a bit longer time. If it's a WTO regulated tender, it should be up to 50 days that you have in total. So then you have 6 to 7 weeks in total to prepare the documentation, including the bidding document that that needs to be submitted as well in time. And in many cases, which is fortunate for companies abroad, is that you can do it more online. With the online bidding is becoming more prevalent now. At least since COVID, it has seen a more rapid development with more companies, with more government entities now seeing the need to have all these things online and limit the number of physical meetings necessary in the procedure. So the only thing is, and that's something that you need to keep in mind, is that many of the systems they require quite technical, specific technical environments to work on. It's although Japan is known as a very advanced country in terms of technology, in terms of IT, it is not as progressed as many European countries. So that's something that you need to be aware of. They make nice televisions, but in terms of software, it can be a bit of a desert. And also, for example, I think I mentioned it last week as well, they still have a lasting love affair with the fax machine. So while we do everything on email, many organizations can only accept documents sent by fax, for example. So that's then the submission. Well, and then comes the opening of bids. Well, that's, as I said, we now have online systems, but there are also still bidding rooms where you can come in person. If at the announcement of bidding, well, then we'll get to the assessment later on. If there are suppliers that offer that have placed bids that are the same price, then that can lead to a repeat of new bids straight away. That's usually that will be explained in the tender explanation documents, the procedure if it's in the same price, but they will repeat it again, and then the companies are invited to place a new, of course, lower bid. If that doesn't produce a winning bidder, then that can also result in a lottery, which can be, well, if you win, it's nice, but if you lose, that can be a bad, that can be pretty bad after all the preparation that you put in it. An alternative that is also seen is the so-called Dutch auction or Silisaga-Hoshiki type of tender, where the bids will be made public, and then the participating companies are invited to place ever lower bids until there is nobody willing to place a lower bid, and then that lowest bid will win the contract. And yeah, that's then the result will be. And if you have placed in many cases the lowest bid, then it will be in terms of price. You will be the winner. If it's I'll talk about it after this. If it's a combination of quality of the proposal, then it will go in a slightly different way. Then it will be a point score. Then, well, if you have put in the best offer, that will be followed by the contracting phase, and then the conclusion of the final contract. Most cases, the draft contract is already included in the bidding documents, and then, well, with all the conditions that are put in. And then in the contracting phase, will be a final contract concluded. Please be aware there is no room for negotiation on price. If a company would change their mind and say we can't do it for this price, then the government organization will say, well, that's not what we have agreed upon, and it will lead to the cancellation of the procedure. And in many cases, we'll have to start again. A thing that you need to keep in mind if you work with the government in general in Japan is strict adherence to the conditions and the deadlines that you have agreed upon in the specifications. You should be aware of that. If the delivery time is such, it needs to be like that. Japanese government organizations as well, if you have to deliver a product, they will really look into every detail of the product, whether it meets the standards and whether it meets the information that you provided.
Can I ask an information about the contract, please?
Sorry?
Can I ask an information about the contract that we have to sign with the
What kind of information do you want?
I mean, is there a template, a standard contract under the Japanese law, or each municipality can
usually
change it?
there are usually part of the procedure is that a draft contract is already there, and usually it will meet it will have a structure similar to many contracts that we have, and there is not a standard. To a certain extent, there is a standard template, I would say, but it is usually included in the tender documentation that is being provided by the entity, and it explains all the conditions that the provider needs to meet, and the rights and the duties of both parties. So and it's to a certain degree it's standard. Yeah, it's standard. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that's
Okay. So deadlines and meeting the conditions, they're very, very strict on it. Nitpicking is usually what you hear from companies that have won a contract. Like the smallest detail is being checked and asked about, and needs to meet what you have written down and promised. And then the delivery execution of the contract needs to be done in accordance with what is being what was specified in the tender. So that's basically an explanation of the of a standard tender procedure. Yeah. Any further questions about this at this point? Okay, then.
What about the assurance of the products? You have to assure all the products that you have to send to the
sorry.
The assurance of the items that you have to sell to the
insurance.
Yeah, is there a mandatory assurance that you have to pay, that you have to?
No, it's in many case for many contracts that's the insurance is waived. That's usually also written down in the announcement or in the explanation of the tender whether you need to pay insurance. But in practice, what we see is that in many cases that's waived. Insurance is waived. So,
okay.
Yeah. Okay, then we're going to look at some types of assessment, and there are of course many varieties as well, but the most common are these two. Lowest price, saitei kakaku, and that's still the most common, and that that makes it very difficult for foreign suppliers. In particular now with the yen being very low, and that makes us in Europe very expensive. So in terms of price competition, it's very difficult for European suppliers to win contracts at the moment. And yeah, lowest price is still the most common, in particular at the sub-central and the local level. It's primarily lowest price that is the decisive factor. But it is also bound to certain rules. You see, when we talk about price, when Japanese companies that deliver to government, they are usually they have their own price, of course, their cost price and the price that they want to charge the government entity. But they are usually very interested in the projected price, and that's the yotei kakaku. The project team I mentioned earlier, or the contracting department, they do their market research with and see what is being charged, what kind of prices are in the market for that particular good or service, hourly rates or those kind of things. They have all kinds of analysis tools for it, and to calculate, and calculation tools in order to calculate a projected price. The thing is, and the projected price is the maximum price estimated by the government. So it's and so that's basically the price they want to pay, maximum price they want to pay. And if in a procedure all the bids are above the projected price, then the procedure has not resulted in a winning bidder, and that will usually mean that the procedure is stopped, and then it needs to be repeated from scratch, because there needs to be a discussion about the projected price. So what we often, and this is quite a lot seen in construction related, public works construction related procurement, is that well, the construction companies taking part, they all place too high bids, in particular now with high energy prices, high, of course, building tools, etc. prices. That the price has become too high, so there is no bidder, and then the government needs to repeat it, the whole procedure, and that usually involves having a different, higher projected price. The thing is that these projected prices are secret, are not disclosed by the government, and for that reason, it's also a hotbed for corruption, basically, because if it's a large project, prospective suppliers, companies, they would really like to know this projected price, so because then they know what they should bid in order to win it, to get as close as possible to the projected price. So quite a number of times a year there are newspaper articles on government officials arrested for divulging projected prices, tender information to government, to company officials in return for money or nice dinners, those kind of things. The projected, the non-disclosure of projected price is one of the main reasons why these kind of incidents happen quite often. Then there's another price that you need to keep in mind, which is the minimum limit price, the Zeitenzegenkarakter. And so the government also sets a minimum price for a certain project, and that primarily has to do to prevent dumping, because in the past, what you would see, there would have been incidents where, for example, a company would place a very low bid, which was an outlier. For example, it's 80% of the projected price. For example, it's usually a percentage of the projected price. And that, for example, lower for 75% of the projected price, and all the other companies would be closer to 95%. That would mean that you are an outlier, and then there could be the that it's basically used as a way of dumping. It's of course a practice that you see in IT a lot, and I'm sure that it happens in the EU as well. Is to first win a contract with a low price, and then with the follow-up contracts that are needed for the maintenance or the upgrade of the systems, that you basically recap the low costs that you put in the first bid. But so one way to counter those kind of practices, Japanese government organizations use the minimum limit price, and then, well, to prevent dumping. And if you have a low price, that can result in an investigation of whether the bid that you've made is realistic. Whether it's realistic, they will look more closely on it. And also, of course, because it's related to the projected price, it's not disclosed. So basically, in terms of when it's a procedure where the lowest price is decisive, you are working usually with bands of prices. Yeah, so that's the thing with lowest price. Any questions about this? No? Okay. Then the other most common way of assessing these tenders is then the overall greatest value, and that's called in Japanese sowo hyoka hoshiki. Well, that is usually, that would be of more of interest for European suppliers, because it takes into account perhaps the better value of the product that is being on offer. A Japanese government organization in Japanese the common practice in Japanese government procurement is that there's a lot of focus on the specifications, and it should be like this, and not that much on the output. It's like what should it do, and new solutions. You will discover that there is, of course, risk averse. There's a lot of risk averseness in the government bureaucracy so it's safer to have lowest price as a decisive factor than have overall greatest value, where the risk of that it's not going to be as expected is higher. Individual government bureaucrats, of course, they can be reluctant to take risk in this sense, and choose for the we need basically this product has broken down. We need exactly the same thing, not an upgrade, or not taking into account that in 20 years a lot might have been changed, but basically we need this product, and it needs to be doing this, and it needs to be as cheap as possible. But yeah, sorry. The overall greatest value does take it more into account, like what a product or service can do. The only thing is for tangible products outside of public works construction, it's rarely used. So and then that's a pity for many European suppliers that have develop products and want to offer it to the market, to the government market in Japan. Well, very simply said, overall greatest value is an assessment of a proposal, assessment of the product or service in combination with the price. So in the explanation of the tender, there will be also an explanation on how the assessment will take place, and that can be in a lot of detail as well, how various aspects of the contract of the product that is going to be procured are being assessed, awarded points, and then, well, you can have all kinds of variations where you put 50% weight on the price and 50% on the assessment of the technical aspects of the product, or 70-30. Of course, it's up to the government organization themselves what they put most weight on. What we see is usually 50-50, I would say. So I already said, well, in terms of procurement of goods, it's rare, unfortunately, but well, you see it more in services, the service provision, in particular IT. It becomes more and more, in particular on the central level, because as I said, Japanese government is lagging behind in terms of digitalization, and that became very obvious at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, because then they had to really set up something quickly, and they were unable to do so because the individual ministries, they were unable to communicate with each other in an effective way. There as well, they had to use faxes in order to communicate with each other. And while their neighbors in South Korea, they were able to set up a program to support citizens and companies within the time span of a few weeks, because they were much more advanced in terms of digitalization of the government. In public works contracts, it's pretty standard nowadays. What we see, at least at the subcentral level and central level, that an overall assessment of the whole proposal is being done, and with the of course, with the whole assessment structure attached, and that needs, of course, to be as transparent as possible. So that is assessment. Any questions about that? No. Okay, then now we get to the red tape. Eligibility requirements. Let's see, where are we? So the first, goods and services. Well, the thing is that, did I go too fast? I think I went too fast. Yeah, went too fast. So, well, for the thing is that you need to qualify in advance before you need to become a registered supplier. You can do it during, in many cases, you can do it during the procedure, but you only have 6-7 weeks. So this would be an additional hurdle. At the central government, for ministries and their agencies, there is a common system. So, and it's called a single supplier qualification, TOEIC Shikaku. Well, if you sign up for this, you can use that qualification for all the ministry, central government agencies. Not then WTO Annex 3. Well, there are 3 annexes in case of Japan, with listings of organizations. Annex 1 is central government, Annex 2 is sub-central government, and Annex 3 is a list of over 100 national organizations, such as the railway companies, publicly owned railway companies, and research facilities. They use either the common system or they have their own registry. So there you have to go to the individual organization. At the sub-central government level, so the prefectures, they have their own supplier registry system, and local government as well. And that's for goods and services. Then on the right, for public works, construction and related services, they have a different system, and it's often described as KEISHIN, although that is only a small part of the procedure and the qualification. But it's one of the steps in order to get the qualification necessary to be allowed to participate in tenders in Japan for public work construction. We'll get to the details in a minute. So, sorry. And it's, of course, it's red tape. It doesn't increase your chances of winning a contract. It's something that the government has put in place many years ago, and in many cases, what we've seen in the practice is it's really why they still use it this way. It's the meaning of it is not really clear. But the thing is, the government has made it into a requirement, and as a supplier, a prospective supplier, the only thing you can do is to adhere to it. Well, the two variations that I mentioned, the single supplier qualifications for goods and services and the other supplier registry procedures, is that the single one for central government has a validity of a maximum of 3 years. Depends on when you apply. It's usually for a set period of 3 years, 3 fiscal years. Well, if you apply in the second year, second fiscal year in the middle, then your supplier qualification will be valid for another 1.5 years, and then you have to reapply again. It will not be automatic. It's not that complex in a way. The only thing is, for a foreign company, they will need to translate some company documentation and financial information. It's free. And it's nowadays you can do it online. One of the services of the help desk that I run is also that we do it for European companies as well for free, and we do the translations and submit everything. And we usually advise companies that have concrete plans to participate in tenders to do this in advance, because if you need to do it, it will only produce a piece of paper, as we'll see in a minute. But it's good to have it already, because it will clear up time for the most important thing, which is the preparation of the bid itself and the documentation required there. Well, if it's not central government, then you'll have to look at the individual organization and see what they have. It's of course, it's more or less the same. They want to know who you are. So if you were a viable company with that has well, that makes that is in good financial health, for example. So at the sub-central level, if you are doing business with a designated city or prefecture, the systems will be for goods and services will be 2 years at the maximum, and will also involve submission of company and financial information. Also free in many cases. For example, Tokyo, you can do it online, and they will process it. It will then, both procedures will have the same result. It will result in a point score and a classification. Well, and now I also come back to the stage lightning contract that we had last week, where we have, where under B, there is a, the line on, well, to have a qualification, well, in this case, A, B, and C, during fiscal year 2020 in a particular area. This is the Kinki area in the middle of Japan for the sales of product, or the single qualification for every ministry and agency. So this is a national university. And here you can also get a registered supplier at Osaka University itself. So and here basically is where you see the result of that, what the link is with that eligibility requirements of those qualifications and the tender. If you're a small company and you have, because they have 4 grades, A, B, C, and D. If you're a D company, you would not be able to participate in this contract. Let me explain a bit further. This is an example of the document that you get. That's the result of all the paperwork that you need to prepare. You get a thing like this sent to you, and you need to save it. And whenever you take part in a tender, you need to send a copy. And here it will explain, like for the various activities, what kind of points you have and what kind of ratings. Well, in this example, it's C and B. And also you need to specify in which areas you want to have it valid. Well, of course, for European companies, you want to have it valid in the whole of the country. So you just check that. And also very important, for what kind of products you want to be eligible. And that's also something that you need to set up at the time of application. Well, as I said, there are 4 different levels. If you have more than 90 points out of this procedure, you will be regarded A. And well, A, and if you're an A company, that usually is equivalent to contract values for manufacturing larger than 30 million yen, which is about 214,000. Well, the threshold, as you might remember from last time, is 15 million at central level, at central government level. And well, the further you go down, is the lower is the projected contract value that you might be eligible for. The good thing, though, is that government entities, and most can be quite flexible in setting the rankings, how many companies they want to have, but they can use it to limit the pool of eligible, and they do, of course, the pool of eligible companies when they put out a tender. What we see most are A, B, and C. That's the most common what we see. So, well, here's an example of how that works in practice. These are, in case if you are a manufacturer. Well, many of your companies are manufacturers, I assume. In terms of what you need to in terms of to get the sufficient amount of points to become a C. So you turn over what was 500 million. I calculated the other day, but now I forgot. I didn't write that down. So you need to have a certain average turnover that's calculated over the past 2 years, and if it's between 1 billion and 500 million yen, then it will give you 35 points. Let me see if I can calculate it very quickly. 500 million. $500 million is 3.5 million euros. So here, so in the upper right corner, that's about 3.5 million euros at the moment. Well, then then you also get points for the capitalization. Three quick ratio tells something about the financial health of your company. So that's basically an accounting tool to if you have a good quick ratio, you get 10 points at the most. Also, years in business is valued by Japanese government organizations, although there are some systems in place to also have startups and more recently established companies give them a better access to government contracts. But it depends on the sector. And then if this is for manufacturers of goods, the value of your machinery, the total value of your machinery in the books will also give you a number of points. Well, and if you have sufficient points, then, for example, between 55 and 80 points, that will give you a C, and you can participate in those contracts. Oh, it's already 11. And this is then the equivalent for if you only want to sell goods or services, where of course the 0.5 here, the amount of fixed assets is not taken into account. Then public works and construction services, which is as I said, a two-step procedure that starts with a case-in business evaluation. I can still use some time, right, Marta? Yeah, okay. This is more complex, and it's also one of the issues that the European Commission and the Japanese government have been discussing in their negotiations for the EPA, because this was also a source of controversy and misunderstanding. And it had to do with Japanese governments in the past would say, like, well, we only take into account experience that you have gained within Japan and not in Europe, which makes it, of course, impossible for companies to gain a foothold in Japan. And that was also taken into account in the business evaluation, and they have been made agreements on that now under the EPA, Japanese government organizations need to treat business experience gained in Europe in the same way as they do it in Japan. But that does not change the fact that the case in this procedure, the public works, construction, and related services eligibility process is quite complex, remains quite complex, and it's usually best left to a specialist and a consultant. One of the things is also has to do with the validity of this document, because in the end it's only a piece of paper, and it doesn't increase your chances of winning a contract. The validity is 1 year and 7 months, but in practice, because there are various aspects in the whole bureaucratic procedure that basically when you have obtained the qualification very quickly, you need to start with the preparations for the renewal already. So otherwise, if you're too late, and you will have gaps in your eligibility and you can't participate in a contract. So the business, let me go to the procedures and give you an idea. So suppose you're a company that is involved in construction. If you're not, then everything stops immediately. Then you have nothing to do with construction. If you are, and you want to do business in Japan as a construction company, you need a construction license. Yeah, so then if you as a company, as a construction company, want to participate in public work standards, then, well, if it's not, then it stops here. But if you do, then you need to do this Keishin business evaluation. And it has a number of stages. The business evaluation itself, basically the business circumstances analysis is basically and the assessment of business scale aspect, that's basically known as the Keishin. The business circumstance analysis is done by an external organization that has been designated by the government. And underlying this evaluation is a complex, well, a rather complex formula, which is listed below, that results in a P score. And the external organization will take care of the Y score in this formula. And then there will be by MLIT, which is the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport and Tourism, that controls everything that has to do with building and transport, and in recent years also tourism. They do the other part of the assessment in their assessment of business scale aspects, as I translated it. That will then result in an overall rating. Well, here on the right is more or less a breakdown of the various points of the objective score. See, so and Y is the business situation, so the business circumstances by an external organization. That's not free; it involves cost. And of course, for the procedure itself involves cost, but also as a foreign company, you need to translate everything. So you need to get in touch with these organizations, and they will, and conclude a contract with them that they are going to arrange that part of the procedure for you. You should keep in mind, basically, that in order to get this qualification, you need to have an office in Japan. So it's difficult to obtain without a legal presence in Japan. I've never heard of any company that hasn't done so, but yeah, if you are really serious in doing construction projects in Japan, yeah, you need to work with a partner in practice, or set up your own unit there. It doesn't have to be. It can be, of course, just a paper company, but you need to have some sort of presence in Japan. And these are all the aspects that are taken into account, and that is not only business, but it also nowadays deals with how well do you take care of the work-life balance of your personnel, and those kinds of things nowadays. Also things like human rights, your supply chain. All these things are nowadays taken into account. And yeah, it's a necessity of, if you want to do business with Japan and participate in public works construction. And that's only one part of it. So then there is at the procuring, well, this will result in a point score, this whole exercise. And then at the procuring entity itself, so where you are pursuing a contract or a project, they will also do a rating and a classification as well. And that will be a subjective score there. And yeah, this is one of the bureaucratic challenges of participating in tendering in Japan, and yeah, it's best done with the help of a specialist, and they're of course there. So as I said, public works, so that's basically the two-step procedure. Then, well, there is some information in English at MLIT about all of this. If I'm not mistaken, Marta has already shared with you the Word file, which contains a list of a list of information of websites that are linked to information that of the points that I've been discussing today. Let me continue then about standards, license, and certificates, etc. Licenses and certificates, it's difficult to say this kind of licenses are necessary. If it's, for example, it contains a project, they can use common international licenses like ISO or PMP for project management. If technical licenses, if you want to, if foreign staff is going to do installation activities, technical work in Japan, you have to make sure that the qualifications of those technicians are approved by MLIT. Also here, basically the shortcut is work with a partner in this way to circumvent it. And it's also the way that that MLIT is approving or checking qualifications of foreign technicians is very opaque. It's not very transparent. It's also one of the points that we always stress with the European Commission, that they need to discuss this in more depth with the Japanese government in order to have more clarity on this aspect. So, but yeah, one of the things is that you need to have, if you have foreign technicians working in Japan, that their qualifications are approved by MLIT if it's a government contract. And otherwise, yeah, it depends on the type of activity that's being undertaken in Japan, what kind of licenses and certificates that you need. Then short discussion on standards. Well, Japan has the Japan Industrial Standards. Well, here is a screenshot of a recent tender that involved the lease of LED lighting at indoor gymnasiums at elementary schools in Nagoya City. So that needed to be installed and replaced. So the present lighting system needs to be replaced with LED lighting in order to save energy at schools. Well, there is then here on the first page of the specification, they already come with the list of Japan industrial standards that related to lighting that they need to meet at least. I've also provided you with a list in an Excel file with a list of all the standards that had a hit with the term lighting tools or appliances fixtures. So it still needs to be translated because it's also only available in Japanese, unfortunately, at the moment. Japan industrial standards are voluntary standards, but they are often required in government tenders, as we have just seen. So you need to make sure and prove that they meet those requirements. Well, for lighting, they are usually start with JIS C7 or C8. Just for your information, there's also a screenshot of the page where you can also check the specification in terms of harmonization. The thing with harmonization rates with international standards is that, according to the organization that is in charge of Japanese industrial standards, is that 38% is identical, and close to 60% is modified from international standards, and 3% is not identical. So there is a certain overlap in most cases. You can check it. You have to use Google Translate again on the website where we have this small screenshot. Well, if you want to obtain a JIS marking, then you need to undergo an accreditation process, which is, of course, can be costly because you need to use a certified accreditation body in order to get your JIS marking and put that on your product. Then there's another one. Here is the screenshot of the tender again. And then the bracket below says that it needs to adhere to the PSE, which stands for the Electrical Appliance and Material Safety Law or Act. That also needs to be met There are two categories of products that are being distinguished under this the PSE standards. Category A are called specified appliances, and that includes lamp holders, for example. Category B are non-specified electrical appliances and materials that also includes lighting components. Companies are obliged to notify METI before they start their business in Japan under this act. Yeah, basically it's one of the you can undertake a conformity assessment of your product with organizations like TÜV in Europe and others as well. And yeah, that's the PSE standards that are also required. METI, this link is also in your Word file. METI also provides relatively good information on the process of obtaining PSE, a PSE marking, and what is required and how this act works in English. So that is available on this link. It's already 11:15. Again, I've used more time than I had anticipated. Thank you for your attention. Is there any, again, a lot of information for you to digest? Is there at this point, do you have any questions?
I know it's a lot of questions. Yeah, this is a lot of material.
It's a lot of material. I know.
And it's not so easy to, it's not so easy to understand it immediately. So I think we need to go through it. I shared with the cluster managers the materials that you provided me, as also the list of all certifications and so on, that I think it's very important. Also the fact that they can be obtained in Europe. So there are some accredited bodies in Europe, organizations that can provide these certifications. So
PSE is, as I understand it, of course, I don't know the concrete activities that the companies in your clusters are doing, but if PSE it will be something that needs to be obtained if you are planning to sell a concrete electrical appliance in Japan. So that will be part of the exercise in order to enter the market. Fortunately, accreditation agencies like TÜV can help you with that. But it's of course business cost and will be part of the investment for entering a market such as Japan's. Let me also propose that because it's again a lot of information in short time span, that the next session in January, then you will have had plenty of time to digest all the information together with Christmas turkey and other dishes that are being eaten during Christmas and New Year's. That will start with a question and answer session. We have a bit longer time plan then, and then you can just shoot away and ask me questions or request further information in certain aspects.
Absolutely.
At that time, and also in the meantime, before you all go on Christmas holiday, if you have questions, then let me know.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you very much, Lika. Thank you very much. And I take the opportunity to wish you, your family, and all our participants Merry Christmas, great winter holidays.
You too.
Thank you. Yes. Merry Christmas.
Next time I'll be talking to you from Tokyo. So I'm leaving the Netherlands and on the 4th of January, and I'll be going back to Tokyo for the first time in 3 years almost because of COVID. And I didn't want to go there with all the restrictions. And I'm going to be in Japan again for at least half a year, and also probably or hopefully in February when you are scheduled to come to Tokyo, that we can meet in person. But before that, we'll meet again then online from Tokyo together with my colleagues from the European Enterprise Network section from the center. It was on the 10th of January.
Yes, if I'm not wrong. Yes.
Okay, good. Then
yes, I will send a reminder to all partners, all of the information to register, and we'll promote also this. Thank you
And
very
I
much
wish
to all of you.
all of you,
Thank you, everyone.
a
Have a
very
good
happy
day.
Christmas
Bye-bye.
and New Year.
Merry
Okay,
Christmas.
bye-bye.
Thank you, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.